Welcome back to the Nutrimedical Report, and I have a special gift for the person to ask the best nutritional question this hour, and if they do that, I will send to them a special less EMF pocket for their cell phone, which they can put the cell phone in their pocket or purse, and it will block the radiation coming to their body 100% and allow it still to connect. So if you ask the best question, again, I'll have to weed the questions out. It has to be the best one. So we may have several people that will call, but the best question, we will have you afterwards. What I'll do is I will get you to contact our 888 line, our order line, after you've called in, and then I will select out who's the best of those people that calls in, and you will receive a free one of these radiation pockets for your cell phone. These are the best devices that are available now at less EMF, and that'll be for our people to call in. Want to deal with some of the latest consultation for wellness kind of questions we have. We have a lot of, I get a zillion emails a day. You wouldn't believe how many answers I do. This is for doctors and patients all over the world, so I'm constantly training. Once in a while I'll get somebody that calls and they say, well, you live in Southern California, can I come down to your office? I don't have an office. I don't see patients. What I do, believe it or not, and this is something that I've learned from practice, is that 99% of diagnosis is mental. You can be in Norway or Germany or South Africa, and if I can ask you all the right questions and I can get access to tests that you've done or should do after you get the test done that I recommend, I can tell you what's wrong, probably more accurately than the doctor right in front of you that has really no training or experience in doing this. And we're talking about advanced conventional tests, whether it's MRI, CT scan, imaging studies, positron emission tomography, quantitative EEG, genetic polymorphisms, organic acids, metabolites, antibodies, stealth pathogen immunological testing, you name it. Because it's such a breadth of experience, I can ask you the right questions, and we have advanced technologies such as QRMA and bioplasma NLS from the Russian Space Agency, QRMA from Dr. Yi Zheng in China, the automated method for quantitative resonant testing of the body. And what this does is we can go to conventional testing, such as lab testing direct. We can use labs such as Great Plains Laboratory, McGuffey Laboratories, look at zonulin fibers. We can do all kinds of things. I mean, literally the sky's the limit in terms of functional medicine. And this is far more advanced than we call the Mickey Mouse level of introductory courses of functional medicine. You'll see it even all the academies. Only about 2% or 1% of all the doctors that even do functional medicine have any real experience over decades to understand some of these factors, and that's why I'm constantly trying to teach them so they'll understand exactly how both simple and complex this is in order to fix things, in order to fix people's problems. For example, I just recently had a request from a gentleman about Lyme disease, and he wanted to do testing. And of course, a lot of countries, such as Canada, don't have regular laboratories locally that do proper Lyme testing, but if you contact me, I'll direct you to the labs. You can do the test yourself, lab testing direct. We'll have some immunological labs that can do testing for you. Immunosciences is a good lab for testing the technology of Lyme disease there in Los Angeles with Dr. Aristo Vujadani. You go to Immunosciences Laboratory, if you just Google that, or Dr. Aristo, Aristo Vujadani, Vojadani. And then when we look at individual illnesses, if you've got Lyme disease, of course, I'm switching now to make it easier for people to do core 4 to level 4. In other words, I'm going to list 4 products that these are like the stars that if you don't take these, don't even consider that you're on your way to getting control of the physiology of the disease, whatever process, whether it's diabetes or Lyme disease or chronic fatigue syndrome or post-traumatic myopathy. For Lyme, it's Allicin Med, 2 capsules 3 times a day for 2 to 4 weeks and drop to half dose. Nutriodine, 20 drops after the test dosage to make sure you don't have a detox with fluoride and chloride. NutriDefense, 2 capsules 3 times a day. The Nutriodine is going to be 3 times a day, 20 drops. And then Power C Plus. Now, there's a whole lot of other things you can be taking along with that, which will be, as you see the upgrades and the advances of the protocols, you'll see a lot more recommended testing to actually what you can do to actually test to find out what's out of balance. And the neat thing about this is it allows you to actually know what test to ask your doctor to do or to go to an academy doctor. And I often find it's very hard for you to try to educate your doctors that basically are ignorant and may or may not even have any interest. They just want to continue running in the gerbil cage, collecting their fee code from the insurance carrier or their state licensed, Medicaid, Medi-Cal, whatever. Or if they're working for the very awful hospital administration, you're taking them out of their comfort zone if you're trying to ask them to do anything other than toxic drugs. They really need to start getting, I call pathophysiology focused, toxin focused. So if you see somebody, for example, has hypertension, all hypertensive have got abnormal heavy metals in their body, abnormal fatty acid oxidation, oftentimes related to elevated blood insulin levels. Hypothyroidism is always tied to heart disease, one form or another, whether it's full, antithyroid antibodies, antimicrosomal antithyroglobulin, or TRS, thyroid resistance syndrome, related to insulin resistance and diabetes with leptin resistance. You always find in people that have these adrenal dysfunction, whether it's abnormal salivary levels of cortisol, DHA, and melatonin levels. You find abnormal ratios of T3 to reverse T3, that's the free levels. You find abnormal core body temperature. So when you start looking at all these things, you start saying a pattern, you say, how come my doctor doesn't know this? Well, if you're inquisitive enough and you listen to enough shows, you download enough protocols, which I'm going to upgrade considerably from Core 4 to Level 4, and I'm going to include lists of recommended tests, both conventional tests and advanced functional medicine tests. And many of these you can order yourself. You can go to labtestingdirect.com. You'll save roughly 70% on all the tests. I can recommend other labs where you will need a script from your naturopath, chiropractor, or MD, or DO. Most of the labs are actually starting to contract to realize it's best to go directly to the patient than bring the patient in to see the doctor. I often recommend you contact me or go through the academies like the American Academy of Environmental Medicine, American College for Advancement in Medicine probably has the largest number of docs that are available, ACAM. The American Academy of Anti-Aging Medicine, those are the three biggest, I think. Those are the ones I belong to. If you don't, you're really going to waste your time if you're not seeing what we call integrative. And this is not alternative medicine, okay? Let's just get that straight. This is integrative, which means you're doing gene testing, whether it's cancer, to find out which genes are turned on and off. You're doing advanced functional tests. That might be the high-speed CT scan. It might be a conventional treadmill EKG or a Lexi scan if you're really suspicious a person just can't even tolerate an irregular treadmill EKG, which, by the way, you don't want your doctor ordering tests just because he happens to have the equipment in his office. You want to make sure the test is appropriate for your condition, and that there's going to be a modification to whatever he's going to do for you that won't also cause new problems. For example, a lot of the stents put in place, in fact, actually have chemotherapy in the stent to prevent clotting or other problems. I don't think that they're really the best approach. The best approach first is to use enzymes to remove plaque, to look at changes in your nutraceuticals to reduce VLDL3 levels, lower insulin resistance, get on a diet that's extremely low in sugar, like the George Cruz, that's Jorge Cruz.com diet, and you can either do, you can do vegetarian, you can do vegan, you can do regular diet. And what I've decided is the best thing to do is just to track for everybody, and this is for all patients, and if you have seizure disorders, you want to make that diet slightly ketogenic. A ketogenic alkaline diet for people with seizure disorders or certain health problems, like dementia. It should always be a ketogenic diet where we're giving medium-chain triglycerides, because the brain in someone with dementia is basically diabetes of the brain, so it's not metabolizing sugar. And you start adding MCT, which we would give if they're in hyperalimentation, medium-chain triglycerides. You improve things like fatty acid metabolism with things like carnitine, CoQ10, etc. And it's the acetylcarnitine, like in our Cognition Plus, and you start getting around the problems. So it makes an enormous difference. When we come back, we're going to talk about all kinds of amazing new applications to Nutrimeds, and I'm making it simpler. The Core 4 to Level 4 will mean, instead of you asking so many questions, this is too complicated, I can't get started, I'll show you what tests to do with your doctor if you want to stay with them, and you may take them with a choke chain along. Welcome back to the Nutrimedical Report. And to say this hour, if you have the best question, for nutritional wellness, then you will receive free a special radiation pocket for your cell phone. That number to call is 800-259-5791. If you're having trouble with that call line, call our order line number. By the way, in order to get us to get your name, address, and email so we can contact you and know where to ship your free cell phone radiation blocker. And by the way, the front of it allows it to receive calls, but if it's against your body, if it's in the inside facing toward you in your purse or pocket, you're not going to irradiate your body while you're using your high-energy cell phone. So that's really a pretty neat device. Want to talk about muscle enhancement. I get all kinds of really amazing questions. One was a gentleman who's in super top fitness, and he just wants to know, what can I do to augment my energy level, cellular and my metabolic level? And I went crazy. Went through all the possible things that improve not only cellular level, but also athletic performance, tensile strength of tissues, etc. We start off, you got to increase your reflexes and your brain function, your central nervous system. So we talk about Cognition Plus and brain power. Neurogen, which stimulates new neural sites, that's brain cells, to grow. And the Neurogen and Nutrifos increase myelination, that's a fast, consultatory nerve conduction in your body, both your central nervous system and peripheral Schwann cells. Nutrifos repairs the cell membranes of nerves, so you get higher speed, proprioception, position sense, protect your joints. You need to have, of course, to protect your cell membranes and tissues, Omega Cod Liver Liquid, Omega Supreme Krill. I also recommend Omega Supreme because it's very important to reduce tissue inflammation, especially under oxidative stress. You want to raise levels of carnitine. We're talking about ALC-1000 and D-ribose. I usually call it a super energy drink. And you do half a teaspoon of each in water. I often will recommend a seltzer or sparkling water. And then mix it up perhaps with some, we make a glycemic smoothie with it. And we have IBS Care, which is the propionyl L-carnitine. Then, of course, we add, if you want to go crazy, you can add mitocarnitine, which is propionyl carnitine capsules. It's the special mitochondrial catalyst, a whole series of nutraceuticals for support of mitochondria. Triacetyl uridine, which is the uridine regular rather than the uridine monophosphate. And, of course, CoQ10 Supreme, CoQ10 Ubiquinol. You need to take both. You're increasing energy level of your muscles. The two work together, CoQ10 and acetylcarnitine, propionyl carnitine for your muscles and your heart. And, of course, for your tissues, Collagen Max, Tendon Mender, and joint performance. So that's for athletes. So, Ryan, the 4th of July is not quite over. We're still having the 4th of July sale today. And, of course, we just got off a list from one of our super athletic listeners who wanted to know what to take to increase cell and tissue energy and protect their tissues from athletic performance. And we mentioned to start off with things like Cognition Plus, brain power, Neurogen and Nutrifos for nervous function, Cod Liver Liquid, which has the fat-soluble A to E and K, as well as phospholipids. Extremely, by the way, head-to-head is better than any of the stupid formulas called HMG-CoA reductase inhibitors like Zocor, Lipitor, Crestor. And I see all the Crestor commercials everywhere. I mean, they're making buco bucks. And they have this guy bouncing around that's overweight. Well, the first thing this guy needs to do is get on an exercise program, get on the George Cruz diet, get on glycemics, and start taking carbo blocker, cut his sugars and carbs down, get himself speeding up his metabolism if it's low with berberstatin and leptin metabolic, and mitothyroid, because most of these people are hypothyroid as well, by the way. And then start taking things to raise his metabolic rate, acetylcarnitine, IBS Care, which is propionyl carnitine, CoQ10 Supreme. It'll make you burn calories. And, of course, Lipo Flush, which is conjugated linoleic acid, mobilizing fats. We've got lots of solutions here. I mean, I have a new protocol called Core 4 to Level 4, so people don't need to kind of buy everything. If I was to tell people for sports, I'd say the first thing I'd recommend they do is take Cognition Plus, CoQ10 Ubiquinol, Tendon Mender, and let's see.
Leptin metabolic is certainly.
I probably recommend the IBS Care, which is a propionyl carnitine. But the tendon mender is really important for connective tissues. I mean, micro tears become macro tears, big tears, whether it's a shoulder, the knee, or meniscus. So let's talk about this a bit, because we have all these summer super athletes for 2 or 3 months of the summer. They're out surfing, they're running, they're doing all kinds of stuff, and then, of course, they get a torn meniscus, they get a torn shoulder capsule, they twist something, it doesn't work for a while, and they keep trying to work through it. They don't go, unnecessary. By the way, high-speed, high-velocity chiropractic is not that good. You want to use low-velocity techniques. Deep massage is really good. Our technologies are great, but you want to have the building blocks like Tendon Mender, Mountain Red Velvet, Collagen Max, Joint Performance. These are going to help rebuild the tissues. That's why the pain goes away, because the problem goes away. That should be our new tagline. The pain goes away because the problem goes away.
That's the way to be, go after the core of it. And I think that tendon mender is completely, it just blows people's minds because of the way that it's been able to work on such tough conditions, the repetitive motion injury issues, where you're really getting the tenocytes to realign and lay down properly. And all of a sudden that's sending a completely different message. No more are we getting this inflammation and pain going on, but you're starting to get back the mobility that's been lost. For many people that's, at least months, but for others it's been years that they have not been able to, through braces and rehab, solve these issues. So tendon mender has been just remarkable for a lot of people with that kind of challenge.
Yeah, it really makes an amazing difference. And what it does, tell us what tendon mender does to the tenocytes, which are modified fibroblasts that make your rotator cuff of your shoulder, your meniscus, your joints, the ligaments in your wrist if you got carpal tunnel syndrome. I mean, this is it. I mean, and people even have problems like spinal stenosis, and they're told, you've got spinal stenosis. People, oh my God, they're thinking of surgery. The first thing is the tenocytes at the neural foramen and at the areas where the dural nerve sleeve slides through there. The apophyseal joints, which are around the little, 75%, by the way, of your sensory nerve fibers for pain are at the little apophyseal joints on either side of your spine. Most people aren't aware. Only 25% go to the ligamentum flavum, which is a yellow ligament in front of the spinal cord, or nerve roots, which is below T11, 12. The posterior annulus, or the back of the disc, or the dural nerve sleeve. 75% of the nerve fibers, A delta and C fibers, come from the little tiny joints on the other side of your spine. So if you change those tenocytes, a lot of pain just goes away.
Right. And so that's done because it's a very specialized and research-based molecule that's derived from glucosamminoglycan, and it's basically a very unique molecule that delivers a message. Often, a good way to think about it is just like your computer runs different programs, softwares, and so forth that you download and then run, and all of a sudden it's doing something, a behavior that is different. And that's what you're hoping it does, right? And in this case, you're downloading a program that's telling these cells, specifically the tenocytes that are forming these challenged areas where they thicken up, almost like a scar tissue effect, and don't operate like they should. All of a sudden, you have this totally different message to these tenocytes, and they're behaving so differently. They're realigning, they're thinning out like they should, and all of a sudden their function restores and goes back to the way it should be.
Yeah, one of the things we're starting to realize, whether it's a nutraceutical or a drug, nutraceuticals have direct nutritional effect, they have epigenetic effects, and they have metabolic effects. And they have gene induction effects that are even going to pass on to 3 and 4 generations, like it says in the Bible, believe it or not. And the tenocytes, when you start altering them, the pain goes away because that's a primary trigger for pain is collagen and these molecules like SRSA, etc. Back in a moment. Welcome back, and eye care. Let's talk about eye care. We have Vision Max, which also, by the way, works for the prostate. Can-C eye drops, Nutritrala, cell detox glutathione, and of course the phospholipids, omega cod liver liquid. The Omega Supreme Krill, which has phospholipids for rebuilding the retina. Anti-inflammatories, Nutritrala, cell detox glutathione, Regenerex. And cell defense, which is really important to stop inflammation in the eye. The eye is very metabolically active. And, of course, the phospholipids rebuild up the myelin sheath of the optic nerve head and the fovea, the central visual axis. People do really well in these protocols. I had a lady call this morning, and I just caught the touch of the call and wanted to know how long it would work. I said, well, if you have cataracts 20/70, 3 to 6 months, your cataracts are going to go away to the point where you won't need surgery in your eyes. If it's real bad, they're going to reverse it to the point where you can decide whether you want cataract surgery or not. If you have retinal problems, you want to stay on these anti-inflammatories because even if you've had a artificial lens implant, which a lot of people think, well, the problem's gone away. Not. The back of the eye is inflamed too, and if you don't fix the problem in the eye inflammation, you're going to get retinal disease. In fact, it's often accelerated by doing the lens surgery. So you now remove the abnormal oxidized and cross-linked lens. Usually happens when people are pre-diabetic or diabetic faster. But whatever the cause, your cataract surgery doesn't fix the retina. And that's why we talk about these things like Neurogen and Nutrifos, Omega Cod Liver Liquid, and Omega Supreme Krill, cell detox glutathione. Let's talk about this for a minute with Vision Max. People need to protect their vision. I take a Vision Max capsule twice a day, and I tell people, if you're not doing this, man, you're going to really be upset someday when you realize the ultraviolet light now is more toxic than ever. Our food and electromagnetic radiation, they're now showing signs that people who use the cell phone on the dominant side, they get very rapidly accelerated retinopathy, and that means if you're using a cell phone without one of these little cases, which, by the way, this hour I offered, if people ask the best question this hour, they're going to get a free radiation case for their cell phone, which is a pretty good deal. I mean, they get a free case and we'll just ship it to them, no cost, if they call the 800-259-5791 line this hour. So, Ryan, let's talk about eyes for a minute. You got to protect your eyes, is to say, if you ignore something, it goes away, including your vision.
Yeah. Well, yeah, exactly. It's neat to know, though, that there's so much you can do to protect your eyes. And as you were talking about, there's formulations that, like Vision Max, should just be sort of a core as you get older to say, hey, look, I want to bolster up my antioxidant protection against, the onslaught of oxidation and retinal damage and protecting the macula and so forth. And so Vision Max is, much more potent than you're going to find in any retail brand formulation, and much more comprehensive. So the whole idea is a comprehensive way to, defend the eyes against the onslaught, as you're saying, the environmental aspects that we have to deal with. The solar exposures and so forth are getting worse and worse, not even better and better.
Right. And the other thing, of course, there is the fact that when you're protecting your eyes, you can also use cell defense, which is going to get rid of. Most people aren't aware that heavy metals like mercury for their amalgams, gutta percha, which contains cadmium, arsenic, that's ubiquitous, lead that's everywhere. Since even they stopped using lead in gasoline in the 70s, it's the most common heavy metal. It shows up in everybody in North America and the Western world. Yeah. And a lot of food that we have, by the way, is imported from countries that still use leaded gasoline. Central and South America still have leaded gasoline. So if you're eating some foods, believe it or not, they can be cross-contaminated with lead just because they still use lead in the harvesting machines in those countries. Leaded gasoline, believe it or not.
It's certainly hard to believe, and then the world seems so big that you're like, well, those issues are on the on the other side of the world, but that's not the case.
No, the big ship takes it to your side of the world, and then you eat it, whether it's chocolate or some other food, and you think, well, that's not a problem. Yeah, it's a problem if it bioaccumulates, because as you accumulate this over years and years, your body says, ooch, that's not good, because the lead isn't going anywhere except your bone marrow and your nervous system. And
that's a great term. I think bioaccumulation is a really great way to think about so many of these things. It's you use the nutrients to basically lower the amount of hits that you're taking, this bioaccumulation. It could be heavy metals. It can be the free radical damage that goes on and keeping inflammation in check. But the bioaccumulation of all the toxins that we're exposed to is what wears down our systems. And so use the nutrients, bring up the defense mechanisms, and you can live in a much more healthy, long-term way in this world.
Yeah, for example, we know that we have increased oxidative stress from electricity in all its forms, the electrotoxins, I call it. We've got now genetically modified food fed to our animals, so you want to make sure your food is, if you're going to eat meat, it's going to have to be organic meat that's been fed non-GMO and ideally fed grass. For example, if you want conjugated linoleic acid and the proper fatty acids, so it has omega-3 fatty acids. For example, if you eat a grass-fed steak, it has the same fatty acids as salmon, and it has conjugated linoleic acid that helps mobilize fat. So you don't end up with oxidized fatty acids and end up in your artery walls burning your arteries. It's oxidized fatty acids that cause plaque and cause coronary artery spasm because it's a metabolic disease. People think, what causes heart disease? It's oxidized fatty acids. That's why when we take these other nutraceuticals to clear that, Omega Supreme Krill, Omega Cod Liver Liquid, Omega Supreme, these are non-oxidized, non-rancid fatty acids. Yeah. When we look at things like digestion, and this is a really big problem, when I do the QRMA test, I would say 70% of the people have significant hypochlorhydria and or digestive problems. The rare person is younger who may have marginally enough hydrochloric acid, but they almost always have digestive enzyme imbalances, deficiencies. And it's a big problem. You're not digesting. The first thing you lose is your digestion of proteins, then fatty acids, and fat-soluble vitamins, and finally, very last thing to go is carbos. You start digesting carbohydrates even with the digestive enzymes that your parotid glands generate in your mouth. So your body is like, your whole body is just grabbing sugar, and sugar's bad for you. If sugar, you should put on all the packages, the sugar molecules should put horns for the devil. It's bad. And, so we tell people, same with lactose. You take lactase, the lactose blocker. Our carbo blocker enzyme, everybody should be taking it before every meal, because carbohydrates are universally bad. So let's talk about this for a minute, because this is a really big problem. How do you approach it?
Well, you're right. You got to bolster up, the way that your body works and functions. First off, when you're eating anything, slow down. If you're running around like crazy, your body's not going to do a good job of producing things like acid that it needs in the stomach to break down your food properly. And if you don't break down your food properly, what you're passing into your intestinal tract for absorption are molecules that are typically too large for absorption, or maybe they're not too large, but they're not broken down the right way, and they create an inflammatory response. You keep doing that over and over again, and you basically make yourself sick in a long-term way. So, as you brought up things like Digestes, that's a great formula if you're having symptoms of digestive difficulty within an hour, hour and a half of eating. So if you eat food and you go, man, that just feels like a brick is sitting in my stomach, it just doesn't feel right, or you feel like you're starting to get acid reflux type things, there's very interesting things to do by adding Digestes into the system to help regulate the amount of acid, the proper amount you need to break down your food and create the proper bolus. Then if you're having symptoms that occur, 2 hours after eating, this is usually things like gas, bloating, foul-smelling stools, maybe there's food particles. You start looking at something like the enzymes.
Yeah, gastrozyme.
So like, gastrozyme.
The lactose blocker, gastrozyme.
And exactly. And you start hammering those into, when you're using your meals, and all of a sudden you're breaking it down properly, and those things go away. And you can help retrain your body to get back on track so that it can properly break down and eat foods. And then, of course, looking at things like Living Probiotic Ultra are so important to keep that defense of our immune system working properly. We need adequate amounts of good bacteria in our gut. Right. And oftentimes, based on our diet, sugar consumption, as you say, alcohol, antibiotics, we throw this completely out of whack.
Yeah, in fact, people with irritable bowel syndrome will progress in many cases, if it's really bad, to full-blown colitis. And getting rid of using berberstatin and our antipathogenics like Allicin Med will clear the gut of those as well. But you got to have the digestive enzymes, and you have to have the proper stomach acid to start the whole process. So, Ryan, one of the things we often get are unusual kind of questions. We had one gentleman who wanted to know about Lyme disease and how to approach that. And, of course, the first thing I tell him to do is start off with Allicin Med, start off with correcting the brain function, which is Cognition Plus. Use our silver Nutridyne along with Allicin Med, and start blocking the cytokines with Allergon, which is going to block the tremendous cytokines. If you actually measure cytokines in your blood level, Immunosciences lab in Los Angeles with Dr. Rista Vujadani or one of the other immunological labs through Lab Testing Direct, you find that they're abnormal. It's no wonder their mitochondria don't work, because those cytokines screw up your mitochondria. And, of course, mitochondriopathy, what I call metabolic mitochondriopathies, are very common with chronic infections, chronic food allergies, and chronic toxicities, things like bisphenol A, and many, many other chemicals that screw up your energy metabolism, whether it's your artery walls or your mitochondria, which, by the way, it's all tied back to energetics and metabolism. So, when I hear people say, well, you got a cardiac arrhythmia like atrial fibrillation, you're done, you got to stay on blood thinners, first thing I tell them to do is get on nattokinase. Everybody should be on nattokinase. If your C-reactive protein or PI1's high, you should be on that. You should be on anti-inflammatories like cell defense or omega fatty acids, because our fatty acid concentrations are messed up. So let's talk about that for a minute. Nattokinase, this is a very important breakthrough. I think they had a cardiac event or a deep vein thrombosis, or they show signs of hyperviscous blood, say in their QRMA, or if we do what's called rheologics, that's RHEOLOGICS test, or they go to one of our lipid labs, which is one in Denver, because I became one of the lipid lab consultants, actually, consultants even interested in sending special cases to me from all over the country. I would do their analysis looking at anti-Leiden antibodies, factor V Leiden mutations, abnormal intrinsic and extrinsic pathway problems, and you'd find out that the best combination is to start off with nattokinase and go to lumbrokinase, but not the new drugs like Xarelto or the old stuff like rat poison, Coumadin. And so the old therapies, or even low molecular weight heparin, like we called Lovenox. So, Ryan, let's talk about this for a minute. It's a real big deal.
Well, yeah, you certainly want to prevent, the blood from clotting up and causing a catastrophic challenge in the body. And so to be able to use something so natural like nattokinase to keep the blood circulation flowing like it should, what a wonderful thing to do. And obviously people, don't want to get stuck on these medications that can be, quite tough to manage, possibly toxic.
Yeah, and one of the stories I've heard from talking to doctors, and I've talked to a lot of them, they say, well, once somebody gets atrial fibrillation, we got them. They quote bought it, that they're going to have to stay on anti-clotting drugs like Xarelto or Coumadin forever. That's stupid. First off, if your doctor is not testing for heavy metals in your body because you have an arrhythmia or hypertension, or free iron levels, if your ferritin levels off into orbit, you got free iron, which causes interference in nitric oxide metabolism. If you're taking a drug like a statin drug, you got to get off the dang thing because it's going to cause cardiac arrhythmias and heart failure. If you don't have enough carnitine, and there's lots of reasons why carnitine metabolism is screwed up. If your kidneys are, marginal, your carnitine's made in your liver and kidneys. People need to understand that. We've asked doctors, I forgot that in medical school. Oh, gee, you're right. Well, it's important to understand that. So, and then if you're trying to fix things, you got to know what to fix. But start off with nattokinase. Get your C-reactive protein done. If it's slightly elevated, get a Pi1 and do a test every 3 months to see if you're reversing it with our nutraceuticals till you get proof that you're on the right track. So that gives you an idea how you approach it. So, if you're trying to prevent breast cancer, one of the things we tell people to do is do a yearly thermogram. If you find a positive spot, do an MRI scan with a carbon marker at the spot where the cell changes and get a needle-directed biopsy if there's really abnormal changes on the MRI scan. And I tell people take Malignablock, ellagic acid, myco-D2, NutriDefense, micelle D3, and magnesium glycinate malate, because magnesium deficiency is very, very important for preventing cancer. You've got to correct that. So let's talk about Malignablock and micelle D3. These are two real important nutraceuticals. If they're not adequate levels, and by the way, don't assume because you have a 10 that you have adequate D3. And don't get all freaked out. You can do a blood level with both Quest and LabCorp, and they'll tell you what your levels are. You want to aim for around 100. If you're 75, you're not there yet. So you can't judge on how many capsules or soft gels you're taking. And I usually recommend not only the micelle D3, but also our myco-D2, which is 5 different mushrooms, including ergothioneine. But you want to be taking Malignablock and ellagic acid, as well as myco-D2 NutriDefense, which has the most powerful anti-cancer chelator. But let's talk about these two, Malignablock. One capsule, which is also...
Yeah, the Malignablock is a really important one to consider. That is a sulforaphane glucosinolate, and that comes from cruciferous vegetables. It is an extract that's concentrated so that you're basically getting the equivalent of 1.5 pounds of cruciferous vegetables in a single capsule. And what's really, has been understood now and growing in its literature review is the fact that it is a substance, Malignablock. When you take it and you unleash the power of the sulforaphane glucosinolate, what you're doing is it's not only antioxidant and has an anti-inflammatory effect, but it's regulating a pathway known as NRF2, which is a big-time pathway in our bodies that we all need to make sure is functioning properly to regulate inflammation, detoxification, stimulation of our own antioxidant production, including things like glutathione. And so Malignablock is a really important one to take, but it's also neat in the NutriMed line that you're going to find that substance when we're talking about things like NutriComplete, the Organics Resin Green Drink, it's going to be in there. Or you're talking about ageless shakes, you're going to get it in there. Or you're talking about Regenerex, that's going to give you not only that substance, but also the green tea and the methylated resveratrol and the curcuminoids like we talked about for cell defense. And so there's a lot of good options in this NutriMed line that's going to make sure you get an adequate amount of this, substance to improve your health.
Right. Yeah, and the fact is that the amount of things triggering off cancer, this helps the cells repair DNA on a daily basis. And the repair shop, you need to have that stimulation. Also is a very powerful stimulant for phase 2 detox. So when you take the SGS, it leads perfectly. That's why it's an ageless to use of life support, which is all the ways of chelating or attaching the toxins to molecules that get in your bile and then get out in your stool. And that includes methylation, sulfonation, and glucuronidation. Those are the primary pathways. And methylation is extremely important for many things: digestive enzymes, myelination of peripheral and central nerve fibers, and also the maintenance of nitric oxide levels in your artery walls. Plus the neurotransmitter conversion of tetrahydrobiopterin, which is in your arteries and in your brain, for converting amino acids to neurotransmitters. So it's a big deal. Well, I guess we only have a minute or so left. I'm going to let you choose the 4th of July. What you recommend to tell people to say, well, what should they buy on the last day of the 4th of July sale? Because our next sale is 2 months away at Labor Day. What should they buy?
I think that people should buy. If you're a girl, I think you're going to love Collagen Max.
Right.
I think you're going to absolutely love it. Hair, skin, and nails, they change dramatically on the outside of your body. And so for those vanity aspects, it is so powerful, much more powerful to heal from the inside out than taking all these high-priced skincare creams that really are doing nothing but surface-level change.
Yeah, this
so I think Collagen Max. And for the guys, I think that you look at something like Men's Max, where you're talking about adequate levels of free testosterone in the body to basically increase muscle mass, athletic performance, sexual performance, virility aspects. It's just, those two are really neat for both men and women.
Right. Yeah, because it's a sex hormone binding globulin. You can ask your doctor to measure it. When they measure testosterone or your blood tests, ask them to measure SHBG, sex hormone binding globulin. And if it's elevated, you want to get it back down and release the male hormone because you're making plenty, long before you start adding testosterone gel or injections. Because if you take too much of these injections or gels, unless you're taking our hormone synergy, you're going to convert it to girls. In fact, we did some tests. I think one of the jokes I heard recently is a doctor reporting that the levels in his male patients of female hormones was higher than his wife and his daughter because his body was converting it to female hormones. So not a good thing to do that unless you're taking things like our hormone synergy, which is also flash away, so it stops hot flashes, which, by the way, do occur in guys, but they won't admit it if they're going through andropause or guy pause. So yeah, Men's Max, that's a good one. And another good one for men is to take Cognition Plus so you can stay at least half a step behind your wife. Not maybe equal, maybe not so far behind. Cognition Plus. Back in a moment with hour number 3 with John Moore. Dr. Bob Thiel tomorrow. Major updates.